Hi, 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 hi. Guess what? It is time for the Ruby Girl Talk. Good evening, everyone. How are you? I am so excited tonight. This is your favorite Ruby Girl, Kay, and I have a wonderful guest, a powerful, dynamic woman of God. She is just awesome. She is going to rock y'all mind tonight with what she has to say. And so, who is my guest tonight? No other than the Leadership Experience Tour speaker, Cynthia Mobley Howell. How are you this evening?
I am absolutely fantastic, Kay. How are you?
You fantastic. I just gotta be a double awesome. I'm feeling double awesome this evening
Love
because
it.
I'm so glad that I secured an interview with you because I know you are a busy lady. I know you're hitting those stages right now. I know you're hitting those cameras. And so for you just to take a minute to sit and talk with us, we're going to make this powerful. We're going to hit it. We're going to put out some great information for my viewers out there. And I like to thank everybody that is faithful to the Ruby Girl Talk that share it. So if you're watching, share this, share. So Cynthia, I'm going to do a quick commercial for a little shout out for myself. And while I do that, I want you to go on my page, Karen Died, and I want you to find a video and share it on your page so your people can see it also. So,
Oh,
okay, my name is, once again, Karen Dot, your favorite Ruby Girl. Ruby Girl is based off Proverbs 31 and 10. Who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above the price of a ruby. And so that makes us women priceless princesses. I love it. I love it. When I tell you, God has just restored so much to me with that one verse. So I am the owner, if I haven't told you before, of His Designs LLC. My brand is Ruby Girl. We are creatively bringing Christ to the world. So if you go to rubygirl.net, you can get this really wonderful t-shirt. When I tell you this t-shirt, Ruby Girl, Proverbs 31 and 10, a priceless princess, stands out in the crowd. I was in New York with my friends and we had on Ruby Girl shirts and I could spot them in a minute in the crowd. It's just something about the Ruby Girl shirt that stands out. And then guess what? I am the inventor of the bra wallet. This one is nylon, very flexible. Just take it, flip it right here, and just make it disappear. And so some people say, well, I have nothing up here. It still works for you. Believe it or not, it still will just disappear because it just lays flat against your chest. So it's very secure. It lasts a long time. It zips from the top bottom, so you can just whip it out and store and whip it back, and it's sanitary. And then that's tough girl. That's for my women that say, hey, I've been through a lot. I am tough. And then this is for my Ruby girls that just want to match with their t-shirt, very fashionable. And so this one is, oh, that's canvas. I'm sorry, that's nylon. This one is canvas. And so it's softer and it fits. It feels so good, ladies. I'm telling you, I go to bed and forget I have my bra wallet on. So, Miss Cynthia, it's time for us to talk to you. So I want you to introduce yourself because you are such a marvelous, fantastic, kingdom driven, dedicated to the cause of letting people know about mental illness, mental health, and you are a voice that is rare in our community. So introduce yourself. Let the people know about what you do and who you are.
absolutely. And I got to get one of those bra wallets, by the way. So, first of all, let me just say to you, Kay, thank you so much for having me on Ruby Girl Talk this evening. I'm just so excited. In the words of Les Brown, I'm just plum pleasing, proud to be conversating with you this evening. And that said, I am Cynthia Mobley Howell, the CEO and founder of How Well Are You, where I am lending my voice to break the stigma surrounding mental illness with a primary focus on the importance of early intervention. And as we get more into the interview, I will share more about myself, but that's kind of it for now.
That's great. Now, Cynthia, I always love to go down the list with my people. You're a speaker, you're an author, you're a minister, and you're a coach. Now, tell us about your business. How well are you? And it's actually a play off your last name. The How Well Y'all is her last name. And I just thought it was so awesome. So tell us about your business.
Absolutely. So, how well are you is about mental health advocacy and offering services through speaking, coaching, and writing. I am a best-selling author, and this is to address the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. See, we advocate for the mental health community first and foremost by being vulnerable and telling our truth. That's in hopes to encourage someone else. You see, we stand up for others who don't have a voice, Kay, and we remind them that they're not alone. So many people with mental illnesses feel like they're alone. They're not alone in their struggles, and their mental illness is not their fault.
I love that. And a lot of time the stigma with mental illness is what's wrong with you? Just get over it. Just think differently because you understand when somebody break their arm or you see a physical ailment. It's hard to understand that mental ailment because you think people have control of their minds, but it can be chemical based.
Right.
Also, as we know in the spiritual realm, sometimes it can be spiritual things, spiritual attacks that people are going through on their mind. And sometimes medication corrects it, sometimes it don't. But I like the fact that you said, I want them to know they're not alone because a lot of people that suffer with mental illness, they'll tell you, I feel so alone. No, nobody understand. And even when you share, like I personally you know how you will share that you struggling with something mentally and people like, no, you're not. You cancel that, you that. And so then you sink back in yourself and be like, okay, I just deal with this by myself. You can't do people like that. Yes, if as Christians we have scriptures. Yes, we have the Lord. But we have mental issues that we need help with. Like you break your arm. You ain't gonna sit up there and just lay hands and pray and pull out scriptures. You going where?
Exactly.
To the doctor.
Exactly.
So I love your business. I love the name of it. And so you are so passionate about mental health awareness. Now, what are some signs that a person would display when they're having mental challenges?
Absolutely. And there are many, but of course, I can't name them all, but I can certainly name a few. And I'm sure many of you, if you think about it, as I'm naming these signs, I'm sure that you could probably think about someone, maybe even yourself, that you have seen that may be experiencing these signs. So pay attention. Don't ignore these signs. So one of the signs is confused thinking or problems concentrating or learning, so don't discount. Sometimes, we think if we're giving someone instructions or helping someone with something and they don't seem to be grasping it and they seem to be kind of like we're trying to explain something to them and they seem like they're in a fog, but it could be a sign that they're experiencing a symptom of a mental illness. Excessive worrying or fear. You were talking about scripture early, and we know that the Bible tells us to be anxious for nothing. However, sometimes it is spiritual and sometimes it is biological. Sometimes things are happening on the inside. The chemistry is off. So when we excessively worry, all of us have a tendency sometimes to worry about things. And we know that we're not supposed to worry, but come on, let's face it, we're human. So we have to snatch that thing. But if we're worrying excessively and we're always fearful about things, then there could be a possibility that there are some mental health issues going on there. Feeling extremely sad or low. Again, we all have a tendency. Some days I wake up with the blues. And I'm like, why am I feeling this way? What's going on? That's normal. That's normal for anyone. But if it's extreme and if it's extensive, if it goes on and on and on for days or weeks, then you may better check that. Avoiding friends and social activities, that's another sign that there may be a mental illness present. Difficulties understanding or relating to other people is like everything somebody says is setting you off. Okay, what's going on with that? Prolonged or strong feelings of being irritated or being angry. And then the last one is extreme mood changes. And I know I ain't talking about menopause. And for you men, whatever it is y'all go through, I ain't talking about menopause either. But I'm talking about this thing where, 1 minute you're here, the next minute you all the way to the other end of the spectrum, extreme mood changes. Kay, these are just a few signs that someone could be experiencing a mental illness.
Those are some very good signs. And I just want to say to my single ladies out there, I always try to put something out there for us.
Mm-hmm.
Please heed this stuff in the beginning when you're dating and you see certain reaction from men. You can't just band-aid that. It just don't correct itself. Like if your car out of alignment, it don't eventually, if you keep driving, get back in alignment, it get worse, So I love that you gave these tips. And you're right. It seems like anything in your mind that becomes extreme,
Yes.
extreme fear, extreme depression, extreme just can't focus, just all over the place, because you see people like that and you think, oh, they just scatterbrain, but it's not that. Sometimes their mind is just going with so much stuff that they actually cannot focus. So when a person come to you and they're talking about their mental challenges, I know that's not one of the questions, but how would you talk to that person? How should you respond to that person? Should you just say, girl, you all right? Or girl, quit tripping, go read your Bible? How should a person actually respond to them?
You ask questions. Just ask some questions, not intimidating questions or like you're grilling them, but be very tactful and be very discerning when you're asking the questions as you're listening to their answers. That way you can kind of perceive whether it's something deeper than what you're actually seeing. So I would say ask questions, because that's what I do. A lot of times people will come to me and they say they're feeling a certain kind of way, and just because I'm into that mental health awareness thing, something immediately turns on. So I'll just ask some simple questions like, okay, how long have you been feeling this way? You sleeping okay? Just ask questions. Now, not like you're grilling them or drilling them, but just ask questions. In other words, gather information. And in the gathering of the information, then you can take that information and you can process it. And at that point, you can determine. Now, in no means, I'm not a mental health professional, but I have done extensive research and I have over 40 years of lived experience with mental health conditions, so I understand a lot of things. So just ask some questions. And as I started to say, as you ask those questions, just process and then determine, okay, that's just a fleeting thing. Sometimes it can just be a fleeting thing, but depending on those answers, you can tell if it's something deeper than just a fleeting situation.
Especially if they say, I've been struggling with this for a while. This thing
Mhm.
is really getting to me. Because the first person you usually go to is your best friend.
Exactly.
that's the first person, you talk to, you run this thing by, because they should know you better than anybody. So if
Yes.
they like, yeah, I see a little difference in you. I notice, you kind of withdrawn a little bit. And this pandemic has not helped. I think this pandemic is like the seasoning that
Mhm.
some people needed for their mental health challenges to really just be full blown. But being locked in the house,
Mhm.
it does something to your mind. It
Mhm.
changes you, like, especially for an extrovert. I know they just went crazy during this lockdown.
Exactly. You kind of took the words right out of my mouth. Really didn't bother me because I always I refer to myself as an introverted extrovert. When I'm out there with people, I love people, and when I'm out there with people, I'm good. I'm having fun. Let's do what we do. But when I'm in, I'm in. Don't come knocking at the door. Don't ring the doorbell. Don't bother me. I'm good. So the pandemic, in that regard, hasn't bothered me because I'm an introvert anyway. I'm a homebody anyway. But I have this acronym that I use that's IDA, IDA, and it stands for, the I is for identify, the D is don't deny, and the A is act quickly. So I just want to deal with when you were talking about, if we're talking about a best friend, identify. If your girl or your boy, if you're a guy that's listening, if they are exhibiting unusual behaviors. Identify if their behavior is unusual, because we all go through moments, and we all have phases. But when you know someone well, when they are experiencing an unusual behavior. So when you identify that, then you know that there's something deeper going on than what is actually on the surface.
That's true. So, Cynthia, you were a speaker for Sean Fair's Leadership Experience Tour. I, and we both know that was awesome, an awesome experience. Now, you shared your story of your family mental health challenges. Now,
Mhm.
why do you think it's such a stigma in our community about mental illness? We'll talk about your family's mental illness after the break, but why do you think it's such a stigma? Like, it's almost like you got some kind of disease that people like, oh, I got to get away from that person.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely, Kay. Negative attitudes and belief towards people who live with mental health conditions is very pervasive within the U.S. and particularly within the African American community. So there's one study that showed that 63% of Black people believe that a mental health condition is a sign of personal weakness.
Oh,
So, personal weakness, you weak. I think we may have alluded to this early on, you know. So, as a result of this, people can experience shame. I remember that's what happened in my family, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So, people can experience shame about having a mental illness. And the thing about that is they worry that they might be discriminated against due to their condition. So, because of that, a lot of people are challenged with seeking help because they don't want anyone to think that they are weak. And in our culture, we definitely don't want to be considered as weak because we are not weak. We have been through some stuff. We've been through, as TD Jake said, we've been through hell and high water. You know, we've survived a lot. So we consider ourselves to be a very strong culture. So when we start talking about mental illness, that's why a lot of people want to stay silent, because we as a people don't want anyone to think that we're weak. And it's not
that
even being weak.
that is so powerful. You're right, because it's like people forget everything breaks down. Our bodies are a car. Your engine needs certain maintenance, and if
Mhm.
you notice, other cultures have therapists. They are, I've been with a therapist for 15 years. It's nothing to them. It's like a therapist is like their coach, and it helps them with their mental issues and stuff. And for some of them, they've been going forever, and you still got these mental issues. So but they might have been worse if they didn't have a therapist. But for us, we're like, I'm not going to no therapist. I'm all right. It'll be okay. It'll heal itself. And you're right. There is a stigma. You feel like when you admit it to somebody that you're weak, like the heart, like I had went to New York last month,
Mhm.
and I had a panic attack while driving. I literally just got scared of curves and stuff like that. And to the point that when my friend was driving, I was holding on to the door. I had this extreme fear. Before, it's been like a little nervousness, but this was extreme fear. I was embarrassed. I felt weak. I was so ashamed. I felt like a little child, that you're a grown woman and here you are scared of going around curves, but it was nothing that I could control. It literally would just take over my body. I was saying scriptures, I was speaking in tongues, but this fear literally grabbed me and paralyzed me to where I just couldn't see, function right, or anything. And I had never experienced well, I kind of had experienced it before, but it was to a whole nother magnitude this time. And during the whole trip, I was mindful that I showed that part of me. I was mindful and embarrassed, like now they know my secret. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people with mental illness. And you're right, you feel like you're weak.
Mhm.
You should be able to control your thoughts, but literally, people with phobias and fears, you can't.
That's right. That's right.
Mm.
And when you when you're on the outside looking in, you don't know what that person is going through. So, this is a no judgment zone here. And because I've lived this, now had I not lived it, I may have had some of those same types of you know, misconceptions or attitude toward people that's dealing with mental illness. And to be absolutely honest, I did at first, even dealing with it with my family, like, they just cutting up, or they just this, or they should be stronger than that, or whatever. But as time would go on, I would realize, and as time went on, and now that in retrospect, a lot of it is in the past, but a lot of it is right here, as I'll share with you in a few moments. We're still there, but when I look back, there were times when I'm like, he know what he doing. He know what he doing, but
Yeah.
you cannot control it, as bad as those of us who say we're sane, because for real, all of us a little cray cray, but if truth be told, some of
Yes.
we functional cray cray. Like they say about alcoholics, you got functional alcohol, you got functional cray,
Hmm.
just not as severe, and we just are not at that point. But some of us, like they said, it's a thin line between sanity and insanity. But yeah, they can't control it. If they could, they would. Who would want
Yes.
to be dealing with that type of situation? So, and what you experienced, what came to me as you were talking about your experience with the panic attacks. The thing about it is, it was real.
Yes.
It was real.
It was.
It was real. That's all I can say. It was
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. And sometimes people will make light of it, but they don't understand, even lightly joking about it for a person that has experienced it, it brings on a defense. Like, okay,
Right,
you making light about this. I was scared. I was
right,
afraid. Like when a child is afraid, you don't make fun of their fear. Don't do the same thing with an adult, because it's real. And trust me, they don't want to be like that. They don't understand why they're like that, and they're trying to figure out where did it come from. Because it's not like I had an accident,
mhm,
anything. It just came up on me all of a sudden. But
mhm.
it's time for our break.
Okay.
And it's time for you, Miss Cynthia, to give us 60 seconds seconds of a powerhouse speech about your business. So while you do that, I'm gonna check the comments, see what people are talking about, what they saying about us, girl. They gossiping. No. But go ahead and just blow us away for 60 seconds, ma'am.
Wow. Well, what I can do is what will blow you away is that if you visit my website, that is at www.cynthiamobleyhowell.com. Again, that is www.cynthiamobleyhowell.com. That will connect you to all of my links on all of the social media platforms that I'm on. On my website, you're going to find the book that I co-authored entitled I'm Still Standing, which was a #1 bestseller. It was released last January. And my t-shirt line that I recently launched, I'm Not Keeping Quiet Anymore. And what was once just a mantra is swiftly becoming a movement. I'm not keeping quiet anymore.
Awesome. Awesome. Girl, you are a pro. Don't let nobody tell you not a pro, sister girl. You are a pro at what you do and what you say. I could tell you was a part of the let experience.
Listen,
So now,
the pro got to keep up with the pro.
so now it's time to spill the tea. So we talked about your business. We talked about how you're an advocate. But in the leadership tour speech, going back to that, you shared the struggles, the mental struggles of your 3 brothers. What happened to your brothers and what was their mental illness?
Okay. At first, my family thought my brothers were just acting out, i.e., that angry outbursts and the occasional physical fights. We thought these were just, a routine part of masculinity, boys, the kind of stuff that they do. Then it became apparent that something was just not right. For instance, my youngest brother began behaving very strangely. He would do stuff like walk into a fast food restaurant. And at the time, you didn't have to, now you have to pay when you order food, I guess, for a good reason. My brother probably started that. So he would go into a fast food restaurant like a McDonald's, order food, eat it in front of the staff and the customers without paying. Ooh. And, he would make a scene when they tried to make him pay. And the police would come. They would call the police would come, give him a little slap on the wrist and go on about his way. Nobody is connecting these behaviors to a mental illness. He's at work, he can't keep a job, and he comes home because he's saying, the customers are calling me an Indian chief. He's hearing voices. We don't know, dude is schizophrenic, but we don't know this. Then my older brother's fights escalate to serious physical violence. And now the police is being forced to call with all of these incidents. My brother out in the community being a menace to society, doing his thing, police being called. They're not even recognizing that there's something going on that's not right. My brothers and all of these fights, again, we're just attributing it to, being a routine part of masculinity. But somebody finally realized, after the law enforcement had to be called on a few occasions, now they're taking people to the emergency room for mental health evaluations. And that's when it was determined that my brothers were suffering from mental illnesses. All of my brothers were eventually diagnosed with a mental illness. My oldest brother it was confirmed that he was suffering with bipolar disorder. And my 2 youngest brothers were both diagnosed as schizophrenic.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot. And you said your older brother, he was the one that was bipolar. So he was violent?
He had moments. It was my youngest brother that was schizophrenic. That was the violent one. Incidentally, my oldest brother, who was bipolar, he and my youngest brother had the mental health unit, the local mental health unit, and the state hospital was just a revolving door for them. It was this and then the other, this and then the other. My oldest brother, who was bipolar, finally just became totally weary of dealing with the effects of a mental illness. And he finally, at the age of 32, he committed suicide. He just couldn't take it anymore. My middle brother, who's also schizophrenic, we haven't seen him in over 2 decades. It's like he just disappeared off the face of the earth. We have not, literally have not seen or heard from him. And then my youngest brother, now that was the violent one. Okay. You didn't want to encounter him on a good day or a bad day.
Oh my goodness. Was he like this when he was a young child?
Yes, he was very rambunctious, but see, now we know it was just not that he was just rambunctious and he was just mischievous. He had some mental health issues going on then, but it wasn't detected. I'm telling you, this boy was a terror. He was like I said, he was a menace to society, if you will. He would fight you in a minute. Back in the day, we called it scrapping. I'm dating myself. He would scrap. He was real thin. Had a girly face, looked like a girl. So people called him, back in the day, they called you a punk and a sissy. So they called him a punk and they called him a sissy. And he's like, I'm going to show you who the punk is and I'm going to show you who the sissy is. So we thinking it's just about that. But he would take things to another level. Tell you this real quickly. I remember he was working in a restaurant and somebody did something to make him mad. And this is what he told me from his own mouth. Dude made him mad. He went and put one of those big, commercial pots, put it on the stove, let the water come to a boil, put black pepper in it, took it, and as the water got hot as it could be, dashed it in the guy's face and then beat him down to a pulp. Unusual behavior, wouldn't you say? But
yeah.
Nobody's thinking something is wrong with him. He's just mean or he's just overboard. He was suffering from a mental illness. So he was very violent. He's been in a mental institution now for the past 33, going on 34 years of his life. That's probably going to be his home for the rest of his life until his dying day. They don't fool with him in there either. They know him. They don't mess with him. They kind of just like let him do what he does. If he gets too bad, they'll put him like in solitary for a few days. But as the old folks say, driving along slow, they don't mess with him because he will snap. He will snap. And the truth be told, I remember when he was locked up, quote unquote, for good. I have to admit, I had a sense of relief because there were many times when my life was in danger because of him. And it was by the grace of God that I didn't get severely hurt or killed at his hands because he was just that bad off.
Because, when a person is suffering from mental illness, it don't just affect them, it affects their whole family. Just like if a person is an alcoholic, it affects their whole family in some kind of way. So I can't even imagine you had to have fear of your younger brother, your other brothers trying to figure out what's going on. And you're right, we excuse that behavior. We like, oh, they just a fighter. Or they just have mental episodes and then they're all right. I had a friend, she would have mental episodes. She would be busting out windows, doing different things like that. And we just wrote it out, because we didn't know how to get her help because she wouldn't accept help. How do you help somebody that won't accept your help, but they got a mental illness? That's a question right there for you. How do you help somebody that has a mental illness but won't get help for it?
You can't. It's sad but true. You can't because they have to want the help. And such was the case with my oldest brother was a bit more compliant. The other one who's been missing, you know, I don't know his patterns because he just was never around. He would pop in town and pop out of town and gone for months. But my youngest brother just wasn't having it. He was non-compliant. He would get out of the state hospital, or he would get out of the local mental health unit, and he would not go to his follow-up appointments. They called it the guidance clinic at the time. He would not stay on his medication. There is really nothing you can do. And that's the sad part about it. That is the sad part about it. So that is why he is where he is today, because he was out of control. There was nothing that anybody could do. I mean, he was literally terrorizing our city. Literally, everybody knew him, and people just stayed out of his way. If they saw him coming, like if you saw him coming down the street, you just move to the other side of the street because it's going to be some problems. If you look at him wrong, it's going to be some problems. Not because he was just mean, but he was schizophrenic. You know, he thought you were saying things to him that you weren't. So to your question again, you cannot help anyone that doesn't want help. Let me share this with you quickly. Something that really blessed me a couple of Sundays ago. I was at church, and one of my congregants pulled me to the side, and she said, I just want you to know, because of you putting it out there that you're not keeping quiet anymore, we were able to persuade my grandson to get help. And she just told me the story where he was fighting his girlfriend all the time. It was just bedlam. It was his life was just horrible. And because of her hearing me talking about mental illness, talking about signs of mental illness, talking about, you know, getting your loved one professional help, she listened. She did approach him, and to God be the glory, he did listen. He's in treatment now. She said there's been no fights. He's even calling her and coming by and seeing her, which he hasn't been doing. So that's one of those cases where he did listen and he did receive the help. And because of that, his life is so much better. Unfortunately for my brothers, because they were not in compliance, they did not live ordinary, productive, and fulfilling lives. But that doesn't have to be the case with everyone, but we still have to try. We can't just not try. We can't just stay silent. We have to talk about it.
You know, I notice it's a lot more younger people now that have mental illness that's on a whole nother level. You know, they out here, they don't care about nothing. They don't care what they do. They just reckless with their lives. And we just think it's them just, oh, they being tough, they being strict. No, it's a lot of mental illness in our young people. And it comes from how they were raised. You
Yeah.
know, it's definitely a strong spirit of rejection that's
Yeah.
out here on, especially on our young men. And it's a lot of anger because a lot of them, some of them were raised by women that were angry at their father, angry that they had to struggle. And children pick up on that because when we were growing up, we were not in grown folks' business. We didn't know about the lights was about to get cut off. We didn't know about this. We didn't, we just were children. Only thing we had to worry about what we were going outside, what we was gonna do. We didn't have to worry about nothing because we didn't know the backstory. But now Aunt Sally committed suicide. We would have never known. Be like, she died, she passed on. They would have never told us that stuff. So for children, they getting overloaded at such a young age with our issues that
Yeah.
they can't handle it. And so they grow up and they angry, they're frustrated, their minds are not right, and then they're taking drugs, and
Yeah.
that's not helping anything
So
either. So my heart goes out to you and the fact that your three brothers had to suffer in such a way. So one more question. How did your younger brother end up being committed?
as a matter of fact, it's funny that you asked that. The last stint that my brother had with being committed, because he had been in and out numerous times, but this particular time, I actually was working as a registrar in the emergency room that day when they brought my brother, the police brought my brother to the emergency room. Mind you, I was still processing charts from my brother who had been in on the three. I worked the 7 to 3 shift. They had brought him in on the 3 to 11 shift the day before. They had brought him on the 11-7 shift. And then here I am at 7 to 3. And who appears at the registration desk with the cops? But my brother. Eyes black. They done beat the living daylights out of him. And that's why we don't need, there's a law that's being enacted for 2022. I forgot what the name of it is, but it's where now they're actually going to be sending mental health professionals to these calls whenever people are acting out versus law enforcement, because law enforcement is not trained to deal with these people. And a lot of these people are ended up dying at the hands of law enforcement because they have a mental health issue and they're ended up dead because they don't know how to deal with it. But back to what I was saying. So they bring my brother to the emergency room. They have beat the living daylights out of him. He got like 3 black eyes, just beat him to a pulp. He has a mental health condition. Cop talking about he spit on him or whatever. But that was in 1987. And that was the last time that my brother was committed to first the local mental health unit, and then he was non-compliant. He was taken to the state hospital, and to this day, he's been institutionalized. So since 1987, and I saw him the last time before he was actually committed for good. I've seen him since then. I haven't seen him lately. I talk to him on a regular basis. I haven't seen him because he's in a maximum security facility for the criminally insane, and he has to be strip searched if someone comes to see him. And when he goes back in, and he was like, no, I ain't having that. And I said, and I don't blame you. So,
right.
So I talked to him, but yeah, 1987, that was the last time that he was committed for good. So he's been institutionalized since 1987.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that, but like you said, it has to be done for his protection and the protection of others. So
Exactly.
thank you so much for sharing that story about your family. It's a very unusual story that your brothers ended up with mental illness, but you ended up okay, and that's by
Woo!
God's grace.
Hallelujah. Yes.
Truly, because most people say their siblings would have drove them crazy or they would have been in the same boat, but God has just been sustaining you and keeping
Yes.
you in his
Yes.
strength. So
Yes.
what's next for you, Miss Cynthia?
Woo-hoo! So right now,
Hey, hey.
I'm actually working with NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It is the nation's leading voice on mental health. And I'm working with them because I'd like to start a support group in my city. I live in Central Florida, and although there is a NAMI affiliate in the Central Florida area, but there is not anything in my city. So I'm working actually with on the state level to bring a support group for starters. I don't think I'm ready to jump off into the affiliation yet. I don't know if I want to take that plunge yet, but I want to start with a support group. And God willing, I will be releasing my book in the first quarter of 2022. The manuscript has been done since 2017, but I've just been waiting on God's timing. So the title of my book is Crazy Didn't Get Me, and I guess you can understand the title now that you've heard that all of my siblings were affected by mental illness, and some people would be offended by the word crazy, but it is what it is. That's the title God gave me, and that's the title that I'm using. And it is a tell-all of my experience growing up in a home with my 3 siblings who were all affected by mental illness. So I'm very excited and looking forward to releasing that book. And last but not least, as I stated before, I just recently released my t-shirt line. I'm not keeping it anymore. Yes. And I expect that to evolve into a movement. It's no longer a mantra. It's been my mantra now for a while, but that is evolving into a movement. And that is the I'm not keeping quiet anymore movement. So that's just a little bit. There's some other things going on, but those are just a few things that's happening that I'm
That's,
expecting to just grow, grow, grow.
those are not a few things. Those are awesome things. So congratulations. So let's see what people said today before we sign off. Miss Deborah Hill said good evening. Kizzy gave you a good evening.
Good
Um,
evening. Good evening.
Marietta Mills says this is good. Tamika Scott gave you a good evening.
Good evening.
Um, Katrina Shaw, she was on the leadership
Yeah.
experience tour with me. She says, good evening. Tisha Marie Johnson, she also, and then Kizzy McCrae says, we must normalize mental illness as a community. Yes, we just got to understand that, you
Yes.
know, some people it's going to happen to them. And
Mhm.
so Katrina Shaw said, thank you for sharing your powerful story. I pray this helps someone that is dealing with mental health issues.
Yes.
Yes, Katrina. And then you got some congratulations. People are so happy for
Thank
you for
you.
what you are doing. So I thank everybody that's watching, that's sharing, that's blasting us with them hearts. We really appreciate the love. And so I will be back next week at 8:30 p.m. with another powerful guest. But I just want to say to you, Miss Cynthia Mobley Howell, that I appreciate what you are doing to make people aware of mental health. And you are sending up your arms unto heaven. God has given you this ministry to be
Yes.
able to minister to his servants that have suffered so long, like your brother. Your
Yes.
brother hasn't even had a normal life because of the torture in his mind. Can you imagine the potential that he could have had if he was just been born with his mind right? And just think, the doctors don't even know how to fully get it right. But I think probably if he was more in compliance, he would get
Yeah.
it would yeah, if he was more in
Yeah.
compliance, they could give him the right medication, he could live that full life. But sometimes people are so gone to the left, it's so hard to get them back to the right. So
And
I
that's
thank you so
true.
much for being open, for being transparent, and for getting this out here in the community. And I believe that somebody that heard this tonight, their mindset is changed, that they're going to get some help about the things they're dealing with, or they recognize they needed some help, or somebody they know needed some help. So I
Right.
just want to thank you once again so much from the bottom top of
Well,
my heart. You
well,
are an awesome woman of God, and I pray that God just breathes so much success in your ministry, in your life. Like I say, you do so much for so many people. And I pray that very thing that you desire, that God will give it back to you. So this is Karen, your favorite Ruby girl. I will be back next Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Facebook Live, and I'm signing off. And I'd like to thank everybody that watched us tonight. I really, really appreciate you. Everybody have a great night, and thank you once again, Miss Cynthia.
thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.